What's up, champs? Welcome to another episode of the Short Shifts Fantasy Hockey Podcast, brought to you by Keeping Karlsson and hosted by two guys who are thriving in their new situations, just like some of the recent trade additions we're going to talk about here today. I'm your host, Louis Ezekiel, and joining me tonight, your friend and mine, the great Jeremy Versillo. Jeremy, how are you doing this fine Tuesday evening?
What's up, Louis? I am just nervously watching a couple of my matchups that are already in playoffs because I have a couple leagues that do 2-week playoff matchups, and it's the second week of that first round, and every point matters.
Yeah, I know one of those involves you and Shams going head-to-head in our Babupful Keeper League, right?
It does, but he has McDavid, and it's a keeper league, so, if he wins, it's because of that.
Listen, I don't ever want to hear. I'm so tired of hearing about that. All the chat all day. Davey B, I love you, buddy, but don't need to hear any more about McDavid. But yeah, at least you've got a built-in excuse if you do in fact fall to Shams. I mean, he's been on an extremely hot roll. Of all of the podcasters, he is one who's been able to keep it together this season in a way that many of the rest of us only wish we could. But anyway, I did mention we're going to talk about some traded targets who have really landed on their feet in their new spots. We've certainly got some injuries to cover, updates. We've got some bad teams playing spoiler against good teams, some potential pickups, a patron question. We've got like the whole variety here for us today, which will be a nice change of pace, I think, from the frantic nothing but trade talk that we had all through last week, as fun and exciting as it was. And nice, of course, to get the big mega show on Sunday to kind of put a bow on all of that after the last moves came through last Friday. But let's go ahead and get started. And the first thing we have to discuss is an injury to Cam Talbot. It was announced late. A lot of people rushed to jump on Mad Sogard, and he rewarded those GMs by pretty much falling flat on his face, unfortunately. I know you did a little bit of digging on Sogard. What did you find?
Sogard was so bad against Chicago. He let in 5 goals, didn't look that sharp, but honestly, I like him as a prospect, and I'm willing to give a pass when he wasn't even planning on starting until like an hour before the game. The bigger thing I noticed, though, is if this is a long-term thing, Ottawa's schedule sucks coming up. Their next 3 matchups next week in the quarterfinals would be at Edmonton, home against Colorado, and home against Toronto, followed by a semifinal week of at Pittsburgh, at Boston, home against Tampa, and at New Jersey. Would you trust starting a rookie goalie in any of those? It's a tough sell for me.
Yeah, that's pretty scary, especially coming off such a rough outing. I think there are some cases where, there may just, that's your best option. But there are so many teams, I guess, well, I'm still thinking about this week. But, there's so many Friday, Saturday, and Saturday, Sunday back-to-backs that you've got a lot of options to choose from. But you're right. If you grab Sogard hoping to kind of hold him through, on the plus side, you're probably going to see some shots against. But a little concerning that he, kind of dropped the ball against Chicago. I might hope that, he's like a ritual guy. He needs everything to kind of be just so as he gets ready to start a game. And maybe that last minute sub in, was a little much for him. I guess better to get it out of his system against a team, like Chicago. I don't know. That doesn't really make any sense. You lose a game, and that was an ugly one. But yeah, maybe he's got that out of his system now, and for your quarterfinals, he'll be able to keep it together. But yeah, I mean, a real kind of murderer's row of teams up until, the finals when he's got the Philly game and the Columbus game. So yeah, and certainly this was a, Talbot, is a guy who gets injured with some frequency. He's pretty much a Band-Aid boy. This could also open up the door for maybe Kevin Mandolese to get some starts as well. You imagine you see him over the weekend. So that could also be an interesting potential start there. Speaking of injuries, we got a couple minor ones, or one minor one and one more major in Toronto. We had John Tavares, who was held out for today's game after taking some big hits in Toronto's most recent game. He said he just woke up not really feeling like himself, but it sounds like is likely to be back for the next game, but of course nothing is certain. We also, Ryan O'Reilly had got surgery on his finger, and I believe last I saw it was a 4-week time frame. But Jeremy, you were looking at some of the line combinations and who might benefit from these changes. Who do you like in Toronto, given these injuries and their relative term?
Real quick on Tavares and O'Reilly. Tavares looks like he'll be back soon. He was on the ice for practice. O'Reilly actually got placed on long-term IR, which means he has to miss a minimum of 10 games or 24 days. So the earliest he'll be back is 10 games from now. But for replacements, Michael Bunting is playing power play 1, but down on line 3. Alex Kerfoot took Bunting's line 1 slot, and Sam Lafferty, the newcomer, has taken over the second line center, playing with Yarncroke and Nylander. And that line actually has the only even strength goal of the day for Toronto, with a Lafferty assist. I'm not huge on any of these guys. I think they're good streamers, especially next week. Toronto has the Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday schedule, which is really good. I'd probably go Kerfoot first, because even if he loses that line 1 left wing, he may get put onto the second line center and bump Lafferty anyway. But I still like Bunting over everyone else because of power play 1, which is just so dangerous in Toronto.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm ready to pull the trigger on any of the guys you mentioned besides Bunting as well. I did, Ryan Downey, super patron, has been wanting us to talk about Lafferty. He's got an assist. He shared a Michael Amato tweet with us that said, when all is said and done, I think the Leafs' most impactful addition at the deadline could be Sam Lafferty, really making a difference. Like to see that, definitely. I'm glad he's out there and hustling hard for his new team. It does sound a little bit like damning with fate praise as to the rest of the Leafs' moves. But, good on him. Love to see him land on his feet, like I said, some of these guys that we're going to talk about down the line here. Let's see. Moving along with injuries, Victor Hedman went day to day. Sounds like he'll be back pretty soon. The Bolts did seem like they were kind of coasting a bit as they headed into their playoffs. We've all sort of known what their matchup more or less would look like for quite a while now, so not a ton for them to play for necessarily. One thing that I am sort of worried about here is that good for Sergachev certainly until Hedman gets back, and I wonder too if we might see Sergachev hold on to that power play 1 spot. The power play has looked better this game. Now, opponent and variance certainly can play a role. But we've seen Hedman, get overtaken at times this season by Sergachev taking that power play 1 time. They haven't been afraid to put him in that spot until he starts to cool down. So Hedman owners, you might want to wait and check out the line deployment, game day lines. Or GameDayTweets.com, I should say, to make sure that, he is going to slot in where you think he's going to slot in before you activate him off of IR when it is time for him to come back. Luckily, Tampa is very good about sharing and practicing with their power play unit, so you almost always know who is playing where, which is really nice. How about a hot and cold streak out of the Lightning?
Sure. Alex Killorn has 2 goals and an assist today to put him up to 5-5 in his last 10 games. He got pushed on to power play 1 recently, but he also only has 14 shots on goal in that span, so isn't really in the middle of everything.
Yeah, one thing with Killorn is you kind of have to show some patience with him. He's had some stretches where he hasn't done a whole lot of anything. I sadly dropped him during one such stretch, and I'm kicking myself for it a little bit. But he's got, I believe, 15 points over the last 14 games in that stretch. He has 6 multi-point games and 6 0-point games. So you just gotta kind of hang in there because it seems to be coming in fits and starts. But if you average it all out, it looks quite good.
As for a cold streak, Steven Stamkos is on well, I guess what you could call a cold streak for a stud. He actually has 7 points in his last 10 games, but only 17 shots, which is 1.7 shots per game. We're used to Stamkos putting close to 3 shots per game. He also hasn't been getting in on many of the power play goals recently, even the 2, I think, that were scored today. I'm not really concerned. He's a on the wrong side of 30 superstar, so he's going to go through these slower phases where he may be nursing a bit of an injury or taking a bit of a rest to prepare himself for playoffs. I think I sold most of my bolts leading up to fantasy playoffs, but there's not much you can do with Stamkos, and if you have room, you can add Killorn.
And we should be noting, too, that the other person who's been shifted off that top power play with Killorn moving up and Hedman, obviously, with the injury. So Sergachev moves in, and then it's been Brandon Hagel who's been shifted down to that second power play recently. So we'll see if that is another person who might be in to lose some potential value if he misses that power play exposure here in the home stretch.
Yeah, Hagel has been quite cold lately also. He has a point today, but he had gone 5 pointless before today, so that could be why he got moved off.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Then finally, we got some other injury news, from Colorado. None of it especially great. What's going on in Colorado in terms of when we can expect guys like Francouz, Gabriel Landeskog? I guess I know he's not an Avalanche, but we could throw Barzal in there as well since we got a little news on him.
Nothing good here. Sounds like Landeskog is now no longer guaranteed to return this season, which was really unfortunate for the people who drafted him in the 4th or 5th round, expecting he'd be back in 3 months. Additionally, Francouz is recovering slower than expected. Still hopeful to return this year, but I'm ready to turn him loose in the one league I stashed him in if I pick up any more injuries. And last but not least, there is no update on Matthew Barzal. Per the beat reporter, he's still week to week. He is skating in practice, but no crutches, no limp. So we really don't know what's up there.
Yeah. So thinking about who you would kind of cut loose and who you would hang on to. I mean, if you've got room on your IR, obviously hold on to everybody, right? It's just useful to have those people there. But if it's starting to run low, I would say Francouz would be the first, Landeskog the second, and Barzal would be the third in terms of who I'm willing to drop. Barzal's never been a guy who's been especially interesting to me, but with the arrival of Bo Horvat in the Horvat-Beauvillier trade, that seems to have sparked some things for Barzal before he went out with injury. So hopefully they can come back and recapture some of that magic there.
I agree with you on that.
We had a question from a patron Steven, wanted to ask if we could give our view as to if there is value in Chicago players, since there will be power plays in Chicago and someone, presumably has to score. Certainly, they went to town on Bad's no guard yesterday. So, this is a spot where people can score from. Another team is San Jose that, people were shying away from. Obviously, they were sellers at the deadline, losing Meyer. Still got some talented players, though, and Carlson and Hertl were able to jump all over the Jets late and get a goal and then win in overtime from Couture. So still some talent there. Basically, the idea is, can we mine these teams for, good deployment players? Do we have any special interest on them? So, I don't know, Jeremy, what do you think? Is this a valuable place? Is this a well that's got some untapped potential for us?
I do like tapping into the 20 minutes of ice time power play one type guys who show up on these bad teams. Think your Adam Henriques, for example. The problem I noticed, though, is at least in Chicago's game against Ottawa, they played all of their forwards evenly. I think their highest ice time forward only had 16 and a half minutes, and that was Kurashev. And then they had a bunch more in the 14 and a half to 16 and a half range. I'm going to find it hard to find value from that, but also that may have just been skewed because they were so in control of that game from the beginning. They wanted to give everyone some ice time.
Yeah, so maybe sort of a one-time thing there with, how successful. Obviously, they had been right out the jump. No reason to have to kind of slow things down. And then I think there were some extracurriculars in there, some penalties that may have affected some of that ice time as well. Because I know that, Ottawa was dropping the gloves, to sort of save some face there in an otherwise ugly game. I think, guys like Kurashev, maybe even Reichel, if he can, do some things, it's kind of interesting. Over in San Jose, Alex Barabanov getting, some first unit power play deployment. There's also Fabian Zetterlund, who's getting first line, which might be interesting. I don't know if I'm ready to be super all in there. I would say overall they're kind of interesting. I think I would rather have a top power play guy from one of these bad teams than maybe a third liner power play 2 guy on another team. But at this point, I'm mostly streaming goalies anyway, so not hugely interesting. Worth noting, though, anyone brave enough to start Alex Stalock against Ottawa, who had been, ripping off 4 or 5 goals a game, got just an unbelievable start from him. So way to have the courage to make that start. I'm sure I would have found a way to try to bench him if I could have. So, nice job there. If you stayed the course. And then, just to point out, Michael Bunting got himself a goal here, assisted by David Kampf and Justin Hall. So, take that for what it's worth. You did also have a note about, some concerns about, the Kraken running up against some of these teams that are out of it, but might just be looking to play spoiler.
Yeah, that was just me as a Kraken fan and season ticket holder. For those of you who don't know, the Kraken's strength of schedule is last in the league for the rest of the season. We play in the month of April, where there's 8 games. The Kraken play Chicago, Vancouver, and the Coyotes 3 times against Arizona. I can totally see the Kraken losing 3 times to Arizona and missing playoffs because of that, and that would be extremely painful.
Yeah, it's that kind of danger zone, coming up against these teams with nothing to lose. But why not just go after that and do what they can? A lot of these guys might be playing for contracts or finding out where they're going to slot into the lineup next year. So, they have some reason to give their best, even if the team overall is not looking so hot. One last thing before we head into a short little break here. A newcomer and a new call up in Nashville who have been kind of interesting. Nashville has been kind of hard to place. Last year, they seemed like they had figured out their power play a little bit, when they had everything going with Yossi and Duchesne and Forsberg, Granlund to a lesser extent. But we've had sort of this whole cycle through of a variety of, Nashville, short timers up getting that top line exposure. These, kind of not prospects exactly, but like, relatively new guys. How do we feel about Luke Evangelista being the latest of interest here, in the Parssinen, Novak sort of line of folks getting a run on the top line?
I am fascinated with Nashville's prospects this year. Nashville has sold at the deadline, but are still hanging around the playoff race because of these young guys they're calling up. Juuso Parssinen was the first one. He is a 21-year-old 7th-round pick, and he fit right into their team. Tommy Novak is a 25-year-old AHL journeyman type guy who hadn't really had his shot yet. He looks really good. And the newest one is Luke Evangelista, who actually had some pretty high draft pedigree. I think he was a 2nd-round pick in either 2020 or 2021. So because these guys are all prospects, I asked our friend of the show, Victor Nuno, about them for long-term outlooks. He said that obviously Novak has the deployment currently, so he's exciting for now, but long-term I would bet on Evangelista. He's probably a middle 6 guy, but the most likely to have sustained relevance. Parssinen is more of a good in-real-life player.
Yeah, and we know sometimes those good in real life players are not always the guys who end up being the fantasy darlings, when they are responsible two-way players who are going to play a good 200-foot game.
Yeah, I think all 3 of them are kind of a ride it while they're hot, ride it while they're on the first line type of guys, but don't expect Tommy Novak to carry a third line to fantasy relevance, if that's what you're thinking of. Last but not least...
Absolutely.
Last but not least on Nashville, I think I overreacted on Tyson Berry. I forget if I said it on the show or if I was just really disappointed for the leagues that I owned him in. But the time on ice has ticked up. He's playing on a team that likes to create from the point, which I think is where I missed it, because he's had 4 and 5 shots in his 2 games with Nashville. He has 2 points. He's getting solid second power play deployment. I actually think Barry's fantasy value is going to be okay. It surprises me.
Yeah, I think, of course you sort of expect there to be a pretty significant downgrade, leaving Edmonton. But yeah, he has seemed to kind of fit in. It's been a spot where he has been able to be kind of creative in the way that is beneficial for him. So yeah, it has not been as bad as I thought either. Off to a nice little start with the new team, and, hope he keeps it up. I think, he's got a pretty enviable deployment, obviously, getting out there, alongside Roman Josi at least some of the time. I'm all for it, and wishing him the best down in Nashville. We're going to head into a quick break here. On the other side, we'll tackle a patron question. We'll talk about some traded players who have hit the ground running, and a couple hot streaks. You're listening to Short Shifts.
Welcome back, everyone. First up in this second half, we have a patron question from Andy S. about the Bruins defense. He wants to hear our thoughts about the Bruins blue line going forward. Carlo, Grizz, Forbert, and Clifton have all been in and out of the lineup while the lines shake out. Are we just avoiding anyone not named Charlie McAvoy? And yeah, that's kind of how I feel about it. It's, the banger guys are rotating out, and Lindholm, Orlov, and McAvoy are in the lineup. Do you have any thoughts on this, Lewis?
Well, I'm into Orlov right now. I know Shams has said that he is 100% willing to die on the hill, that he is just getting maximum variance. But I feel like, this is a guy who's getting a lot of minutes on a team that scores a lot. I think Elon said something similar. I'm into it. We saw Hampus Lindholm have an extended run of relevance, at least on 2 occasions throughout the course of the season. So it definitely can be done. I would be looking at Orlov. He is 60% owned, so he's gone in a lot of leagues that are active. But, that's a guy I would still be interested in who is not named McAvoy. It does seem like he's pretty much cannibalized whatever is left of Lindholm's value with that regard. But yeah, I think McAvoy first, Orlov second right now, maybe Lindholm third. But yeah, the rest of the guys, you don't want anybody in your lineup who is potentially getting scratched. So I don't see why you would, even though Connor Clifton has really shown us some things this season, and I think has a pretty bright future, in terms of, being able to put together some offensive defenseman, skills if he can get the kind of deployment. I think those 3, if they're potentially getting scratched, then I'm not interested in them. And that's a great segue, because that let us talk about Orlov there. And we've got some other players who have been traded, who have been off to really hot starts. I want to talk about Timo Meier, Anthony Beauvillier, Rasmus Sandin, and Nino Niederreiter. Why don't we just go back and forth with this one here? I'll start with Meier. Now, definitely the highest, kind of the super hot commodity of the trade deadline, someone everyone wanted to get in on, him and Jacob Chychrun. He had a goal in his most recent game prior to Tuesday night. I do not believe he hit the score sheet in Tuesday's game. He was lining up at first with Bratt and Hughes, but spent time during Tuesday's game swapping with Tatar to join Hischier and Mercer. He is not available in your league, so it's really just if you have him, you're hoping that he really sees that chemistry go. Looking less like a hot streak now that it's 1 point in 3 games. But this is a guy who I think we have a lot of confidence in that he's going to find his footing. How about Beauvillier, a guy we've talked about on the show quite a lot, so I don't think we need to spend forever on him, but yeah, he's maintaining his nice little streak as a Canuck, right?
Yeah, Anthony Beauvillier has cooled off a bit in the past. He's only got 1 assist in his last 3 games and has been shooting less and off of the first power play. But I trust that he's going to continue clicking along on a 60-ish point pace and get you about a hit a game and a couple shots. Worth some value in certain leagues. What about Nats?
Yeah, and definitely I was going to say that's a pretty significant upgrade from sort of how we viewed Beauvillier when we started the season. So, I think that's pretty solid if we think that he can maintain a 60-point pace. Here's a guy that I was not able to add to my team because though I set my alarm, I failed to wake up at the sicko's hour of 3 a.m. To try to grab Rasmus Sandin. It was just sitting there on the waiver wire with everybody kind of aiming at him. Sandin is only 32% owned on Yahoo, but 22% added just today. So you better jump on him while you have the chance. He has 5 points in 2 games since joining the Capitals. He's running power play 1 and seems pretty comfortable. John Carlson, his return remains unclear. So if your league has been sleeping, if it is one of those 32%, those 68%, where Sandin is not rostered, I would jump on him and get him while you can. I would say pause the pod. Maybe we should have started off with this one so that you didn't spend 20 minutes not picking him up because, man, Sandin has been red hot.
Agreed. Sandin is a pause the pod moment. I think the first one since I've started doing these shows. He has 5 points in 2 games with the Caps, played 21 and 25 minutes, is running power play 1. Everything you'd possibly want. Oh yeah, he has 6 hits in 2 games also. This is exactly a change of scenery he needed, and he's also one of 3 Caps defensemen signed past this year, so the team is going to really lean into him and see if he's their future.
Yeah, drop your Eric Gustafsson if you've still got him kicking along because, like we said, we thought that this would a trade that could potentially boost Sandin. We did not know the extent to which that would take place and would probably be very bad for Gustafsson's value, and that seems like how things have turned out so far. How about our last guy on our list here? Always an intriguing player, someone who's been a bit of an enigma through his career, I think, but he comes up all the time on the various Keeping Karlsson pods.
Streamer favorite Nino Niederreiter has 3 points in his 4 games with Winnipeg, 3 shots on goal each of his last 3 games. He's hitting a lot, and he's still playing line 1 power play 1, even with Pierre-Luc Dubois back. So I think he's here to stay. I think they're really trying to give him that role as a shooter and a triggerman. Let's hope that he can push himself back into that fantasy relevance he had a couple years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a guy I would be interested in if he was kicking around on the waiver wire. All right, just want to deal with a couple of hot streaks here before we wrap up the show. First, Jeremy, take us through the Jamie Benn-assance.
Jamie Benn has 10 points in his last 7 games, 20 points in his last 21 games, dating back to mid-January. He has been the Stars' best player over that stretch, which is crazy when you're talking about a team with Jason Robertson on it.
Yeah, he's peppered in a couple shorthanded points in there, which has been really nice. He's not been shooting the puck a ton, like in the 2.5 shots a game range, so not like the kind of Jamie Benn of old, but it seems like he finally has gotten comfortable with sort of that secondary scoring role. And, obviously teams I think are trying to match up when they can their best defensive unit against that killer top line with Hintz and Pavelski and Robertson, as you mentioned. And I think that maybe does give a little bit more room for Benn's line to feast a little bit, which is a nice opportunity for them. So it's been very cool to see the former Art Ross trophy winner, finding a little bit of his scoring touch back. And then I wanted to wrap up by talking about Mike Matheson. Not the world's most exciting guy, but 8 points in the last 8 games prior to Tuesday night. I don't believe he recorded a point here on Tuesday, but he's been averaging over 3 shots a game during that span. I was looking at some percentile numbers from @AR Hockey Stats, which is a fun a couple guys who work on some of these stats and create some nice visuals. Recommend you check them out. And they had some numbers that look really good for Matheson, an upward trajectory over the past 3 seasons, in the 90th or high 80s percentile for a lot of the offensive and some of the defensive categories as well. The only numbers that were really grim were the power play and the penalty kill, both of which were around the 10th percentile. I did get a chance to talk a little bit with Montreal watcher @Baum Rylan. He said, those numbers can't be helped so much. The power play system in Montreal is bad in general. Obviously, they've been missing Cole Caulfield for quite a while now. But I wanted to bring him up not only because he's on this nice little streak, but this is a guy I've got my eye on for some nice value potentially next season. Ryland said he was unlikely, to be overtaken next season for that power play 1 spot. And that he's been, like I said, he's the guy who's been improving, probably maxes out, around a 55-point pace like he's on right now. Maybe, that ceiling could raise to 60 in a really good situation, but I don't think we're ready to call Montreal a really good situation yet. But yeah, this is a guy that I think could certainly repeat what he's done this year, next season, especially if he's got Caulfield healthy for the whole year. A nice power play 1 defenseman that I think you could get in the later rounds, which is pretty rare. When you can pull that off, I think you feel pretty good about yourself. So just a guy to keep your eye on as you're thinking about next year's drafts.
Forget about the later rounds. He's available in 66% of Yahoo leagues right now. I agree with you. He's a great ad. He's getting ridiculous minutes, hits, shots. Looks like a good player.
Yeah. Oh, I'm glad you checked the Yahoo numbers. That's way too low, folks. You should, if you can't grab Rasmus Sandin, Mike Matheson is actually a pretty good consolation prize. So yeah, definitely, see what you can do, with that regard. I love it. All right. And that brings us here to the end of our show. It's been a bit of a long one. But I think we're still working on our come down from last week's, long shows. So, we're just trying to get used to doing a shorter show once again. My continued babbling on this topic is not helping the runtime get any shorter. So thank you all for joining us, especially those of you who joined us on Twitch. Please be sure to give us a follow at Short Shifts KK. Brian and Elon are at Keeping Carlson. Definitely recommend you follow at Game Day Lines, at Game Day Goalies, and at Game Day News NHL. There's Game Day Stats now. I don't know if that's on the website yet, but it is definitely showing up in the Discord, which has tons of really great information. But you can go to GameDayTweets.com and find everything that Shams and Elon are putting together there. Visit that site and the other great sites we use to research our episodes at Yahoo, Frozen Tools, and Natural Stat Trick. Our intro and outro music was created by Pat Roach. John Reed is our digital media producer, and until we see you next time, play smart and keep your shifts short.